An estimated 7 million people took part in No Kings rallies Saturday to protest President Trump's embrace of authoritarianism. Organizers say protests were held in over 2,600 cities, towns, villages across all 50 states in what was one of the largest days of protests in U.S. history, surpassing the first No Kings Day of action in June. In Chicago, the protests stretched for 2 miles as about 250,000 people took to the streets. Chicago Mayor Brendan Johnson addressed the crowd, calling for a general strike. An estimated 200,000 rallied in Washington, D.C. Senator Bernie Sanders addressed the crowd.
This moment is not just about one man's greed, one man's corruption, or one man's contempt for the Constitution. This is about a handful of the wealthiest people on earth who, in their insatiable greed, have hijacked our economy and our political system in order to enrich themselves at the expense of working families throughout this country.
At a No Kings rally in Atlanta, Georgia, speakers included former gubernatorial candidate, voting rights activist Stacey Abrams.
And yet we are living in a moment where ethno-fascists are in charge of the government, when Christian nationalists are making economic policy, when we have a secret police telling us who we are. Their destination is division. Their destination is destruction. And their destination is denied. We will not go back, and we will not let them turn us around.
President Trump responded to the No Kings protests by posting an AI-generated video that showed him wearing a crown, flying a jet labeled King Trump. In the video, Trump is seen dumping feces on the heads of protesters from the plane. Trump has also repeated his threat to investigate billionaire philanthropist George Soros, who Trump claimed had helped fund the No Kings protests, which attracted massive crowds despite attempts by House Speaker Mike Johnson and other Republicans to label the protest as a Hate America rally. Israel carried out a wave of deadly attacks in Gaza over the weekend and temporarily halted aid deliveries. But Israel's now saying it will resume enforcement of the U.S.-brokered ceasefire. Israel had accused Hamas of killing 2 Israeli soldiers in Rafah, but there are reports the soldiers died when their bulldozer ran over unexploded ordnance. Officials in Gaza say Israel's killed at least 97 Palestinians and injured 230 since the ceasefire went into effect October 10th. On Friday, Israeli forces fired a tank shell, killing 11 members of a Palestinian family in the Zaytun neighborhood of Gaza City. The dead included 3 women and 7 children between the ages of 5 and 13. Israel also bombed the headquarters of the Palestine media production company in central Gaza, killing broadcast engineer Ahmed Abu Matar. His colleague Ajib Mohammed described the attack.
We were sitting here safe and sound, and as you can see, the place is closed off to us. No one enters or leaves. We are all journalists. No strangers were entering or staying with us. Then the bombing happened, right next to us, in the middle of the chalet. Our colleague, the broadcasting engineer, was martyred, and our colleague's child's son was also martyred.
On the diplomatic front, President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner have returned to Israel ahead of Vice President J.D. Vance's trip to Israel. President Trump says the government will send National Guard troops to San Francisco and may invoke the Insurrection Act to do it. It comes as President Trump asked the Supreme Court Friday to allow him to send National Guard to the Chicago area by lifting lower court orders blocking the deployment. Meanwhile, 7 officials in Tennessee are suing the Trump administration for sending the National Guard to Memphis. The lawsuit, backed by the nonprofit Democracy Forward, says, quote, "Our nation's founders recognized military rule was incompatible with liberty and democracy. The facts on the ground cannot justify defendants' overreach," unquote. Meanwhile, Vermont's Republican Governor Phil Scott blasted Trump's deployment of National Guard troops to Chicago and Portland, calling it unconstitutional, following Oklahoma's Republican Governor Kevin Stitt criticizing the deployment of Texas National Guard to Illinois. Stitt is the head of the National Governors Association. The federal government shutdown has entered its 20th day. Senate Democrats proposed a bill last week to keep funding the government through October 31st, reversing cuts to Medicaid and extending Affordable Care Act subsidies. But that measure failed to garner a veto-proof majority of 60 votes. It comes as President Trump's tried to lay off thousands of furloughed workers, but that move was temporarily halted by the courts. President Trump is threatening to cut off foreign aid to Colombia and raise tariffs on Colombian goods after the Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, condemned the U.S. for blowing up boats in the Caribbean, many off the coast of Venezuela. In recent weeks, the U.S. has blown up at least 7 boats, alleging without proof they were used for drug trafficking. Petro accused the U.S. of killing innocent Colombians. Trump responded by calling Petro a, quote, illegal drug leader, unquote. Petro then responded by writing, quote, trying to promote peace in Colombia is not being a drug trafficker, unquote. Meanwhile, the U.S. has repatriated 2 people from Ecuador and Colombia who survived a deadly U.S. strike on a vessel last week. This all comes as President Trump is threatening to begin launching attacks inside Venezuela. Despite reports, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has offered to give the U.S. a stake in Venezuela's oil wealth and other natural resources. Trump was asked about this on Friday at the White House and responded by using an expletive to warn Venezuela.
He has offered everything. He's offered everything. You're right. You know why? Because he doesn't want to around with the United States.
Trump has admitted that the United States has launched a covert CIA operation in Venezuela. In Bolivia, Senator Rodrigo Paz won Sunday's presidential election, defeating another right-wing candidate, former President Jorge Tuto Quiroga. Paz's election marks the end of 20 years of rule in Bolivia by MAS, the Movement Towards Socialism Party, which first came to power in 2006 with the election of Evo Morales. Rodrigo Paz is the son of the former Bolivian president, Jaime Paz Zamora. Ukrainian drones struck a major gas processing plant in southern Russia Sunday, sparking a fire. It follows an explosive White House meeting Friday between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and President Trump that reportedly descended into a shouting match where Trump pressured Zelensky to accept Russia's terms for ending the war. Trump also refused Ukraine's request for long-range Tomahawk missiles. Trump reportedly told Zelensky, quote, if Putin wants it, he will destroy you, unquote. Speaking to reporters, Trump referred to Ukraine's Donbas region as cut up, urging Ukraine to, quote, leave it the way it is right now, unquote, which would essentially mean ceding territory to Russia. It comes as Trump and Putin are set to meet in Budapest in the coming weeks. Prince Andrew has announced he's giving up his royal titles ahead of the publication of an explosive book by Jeffrey Epstein's survivor, Virginia Giuffre. In her book, Nobody's Girl, a memoir of surviving abuse and fighting for justice, Giuffre details how she was forced to have sex with Prince Andrew beginning when she was 17 years old. She also said she was beaten and raped by a, quote, well-known prime minister, unquote. In the book, Giuffre also details how she was recruited to work for Epstein by Ghislaine Maxwell, who met her at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort where both Giuffre and her father worked. The Metropolitan Police in London are investigating claims Prince Andrew tried to ask his bodyguard to obtain personal information about Giuffre before a photo of the two of them, including Maxwell, was released to the public. A British government minister said that leaked emails show Prince Andrew had passed on Giuffre's date of birth and social security to his bodyguard. Virginia Giuffre died reportedly by suicide earlier this year in Australia. Vermont State Senator Republican Samuel Douglas announced his resignation after it was revealed he was involved in the exchange of racist and anti-Semitic messages with other young Republican leaders. Douglas was the only elected official in the chat. Last Friday, the New York GOP officials voted to suspend its Young Republican chapter. In one message, the chair of the New York State Young Republicans, Peter Gunta, wrote, quote, I love Hitler. President Trump commuted the 7-year sentence of former Republican George Santos. Santos was expelled from Congress in 2023 and pleaded guilty earlier this year to wire fraud and identity theft, including lying to Congress, stealing money from campaign donors, and fraudulently collecting unemployment benefits. Trump's decision to commute Santos promoted outrage from other lawmakers, including Republicans. New York Republican Congressmember Nick LaLota wrote on X, "George Santos didn't merely lie, he stole millions, defrauded an election, and his crimes for which he pled guilty warrant more than a 3-month sentence," unquote. In one of his first interviews since being released, Santos said he's now free to get Botox. A 5-day strike organized by tens of thousands of Kaiser Permanente nurses and other frontline medical staff in California, Hawaii, and Oregon has ended. No agreements reportedly been reached, but the union representing the healthcare workers said there's, quote, new momentum to begin negotiations. The union's requesting salary increase of 25% over 4 years.